Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Next 100 team, you want to join us as well? Thanks, guys. So my name is Emma Vadera, and I'm the Executive Director of Next 100. And because at Next 100, we believe we bring our whole selves to work, and it makes our team stronger and our work better. I'll say I'm also a proud New Yorker, a mom of twins, a daughter of immigrants, a sister, an advocate for educational equity, and an introvert who hates public speaking, even via Zoom. So here goes. Today, you're mostly going to hear from our team about their work in the areas of education, immigration, criminal justice, worker power, and the intersections between those, their lessons learned, their work ahead. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Next 100 to set the stage. Next 100 is a startup think tank for the next generation of policy leaders. We believe that public policy matters deeply. The systemic challenges we face, from structural racism to climate inaction, need systemic solutions. But that too often, the way we think about doing policy work, who does the work, how it gets done, how we engage with impacted communities is just too limited. Policy organizations and government too often hire from existing networks and traditional backgrounds. They expect people who are new to the space to do their time researching others' agendas. They don't intentionally skill build, give time to learn, or create truly inclusive and democratic cultures. And they often have to rely on funders who may value academic expertise and experience in government over lived experience. They don't get to actually listen day in and day out to the communities they're trying to serve. There's exceptions to all of this, of course, but these are the trends. And each of these decisions, made over and over, become systemic barriers to the public policy space. They make it harder for new voices to break in, which makes it harder for new ideas to break through. And at Next 100, we want to change that by investing in people. We want to empower a new set of leaders who you're going to hear from today, who will bring different perspectives, experiences, skills, and ideas to drive systemic policy change. We launched last year. We were overwhelmed with applications. We had so many applicants, young people, people of color from around the country writing about how they want to make policy change, about how they feel left out of the conversations happening, despite living the challenges being debated. We hired this fantastic team of policy entrepreneurs, as we call them, who you can see, to work on education, as I said, immigration, worker rights, and power, criminal justice. And then with me and with the Century Foundation and our associate director, Dan Edelman, they literally built Next 100 as an organization. They developed our systems, our culture, our values. They decorated our office. They ran trainings. They bought snacks, always on budget, Raquel, thank you. They each started the year, to give you a little background, doing a learning sprint in their area and some skill building training sessions across issue areas. They met with, they learned from, they taught policymakers, advocates, and activists and each other. They've gotten to work with other stakeholder organizations in their areas. They've gotten to work with communities and impacted individuals. And they've gotten to work. They've worked on issues at the federal level in New York State, in New York City, greatest city on earth, and in Oklahoma. They've published words, videos, they've put up murals. Overall, just put it together for this, they've done over 50 pieces of policy change-making content over the past year. They've done research, they've done analysis, they've used storytelling to make change, they've developed original policy proposals, they've surveyed charter school alumni, they've surveyed millennials and Gen Z, they led a petition to Congress for Native communities, they appeared with AOC and Bernie, they testified to the New York State Assembly and the New York City Council, they did a TikTok. I learned what TikTok means over the course of the past year, sort of. They've worked with and for people like them, and they've worked with and for others. When COVID happened and the uprising, we've had the privilege to be able to make it through. The work got harder, but also more urgent. The dueling crises of COVID, of long overdue conversations about structural racism, the collapse of the economy that's disproportionately hurt workers and families of color, the same workers and families who are in low-wage jobs, the same workers and families who didn't get the education they deserved in the first place, the same workers and families who don't have the healthcare they need or the housing they deserve. These crises, we think, all make the case for our work more urgent. Systemic challenges need systemic solutions that can only often be met by the scale of government. But the power of government and policy must be matched by the effectiveness of government and policy, the responsiveness of government and policy to communities, and the creativity of government and policy. That's not what we're seeing now, but it's what we hope to have happen to change the face and future of progressive policymaking. And the Next 100 team that you're seeing, they're going to fix all that. And you'll hear from them about that. Before I shut up, a few quick thank yous I probably should have led with. First, big thank you to the Censoring Foundation, especially President Mark Zuckerman, but really the full staff over there, as well as the Censoring Foundation board. Without them, Next 100 would not exist, very literally. Thank you guys for your support, financial, intellectual, operational, sometimes emotional, as well as the autonomy. In a world where resources are limited and overall bossiness is not that limited, we are very lucky to have you supporting us. Thanks to many of you I can't see because we're in Zoom world now, but deeply appreciate for helping us build Next 100. It's a real live thing. It turns out building a new thing is hard. A lot of you told me that. It's harder in a time of COVID. None of you warned me COVID was coming. But thanks to all of you, we've gotten to where we are, and we're excited to keep working together and moving forward with you. Thank you to Dan Edelman, our Associate Director, who you will not see today, but who is making all the things happen behind the scenes today and every day. And thank you. And finally, thank you to the policy entrepreneurs you're about to hear from. I have joked with them that they all signed up for a job that did not exist at an organization that did not exist. Many of them moving from other parts of the country to do that. It's like a little bit iffy personal decision-making from my perspective, but I'm so glad they did because together they've helped build the organization of Next 100, even as they've done their own learning, policy change making, and advocacy work. They've supported each other and me. As you'll hear, they've challenged each other and me. They've taught each other and me. They've sometimes mocked each other and me. I imagine we'll hear a little bit of that too. But mostly, I feel like working with them every day, they and people like them are going to fix all the things we need. So that's good. With that, over to the first three of them. They're each going to get you up to speed on their work over the past year, some of their learning, some of the work ahead. We'll take some questions from all of you. I see some are already rolling in. Look forward to more. And then we'll wind up with a little bit of music from our in-house DJ, Zaki, which is the same way we wind up our best weeks at Next 100. So with that, first up, Fila, Taif, Rosario, over to you guys.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It's so good to be with you all. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. Super excited to join you during this event and to kick off this conversation with two of my amazing colleagues, Rosario and Fila. So guys, why don't we just kick it off with a quick round of introduction, maybe just say your name and what issue you're working on. I'm gonna start off. My name is, again, Taif Jani, and my work at Next 100 centers around cultivating immigration policies that are designed to help grow our economy and build culturally inclusive communities. So what about you, Fila?
Hi, everyone. My name is Fila Townsend. I work in the area of economic opportunity, and I focus on labor issues as well as issues that fall at the intersection, I would say, of labor policy and tech policy. So really thinking about how can workers better use technology to build power, but on the other hand, what are the ways that technology actually harms workers, particularly infringing on their rights and protections and their ability to organize and engage in collective action. So Rosario, why don't you join us?
Thanks, Fila. Hi, everyone. My name is Rosario Quiroz Villarreal, pronoun she, her, ella. And at Next 100, I focus on immigration like Taif, but looking specifically at the intersection with education. And just more specifically within my work, that means centering the voices of undocumented and mixed status immigrant families. And Fila, I want to pass it back to you just with saying, I have learned so much from you and I have felt so included throughout this past year by your work and the analysis that you bring to the labor field. And I really just have some words that have always stuck with me from you. This idea that everyone is a worker and that we've got to connect the dots. So I would love to hear from you. What are some of the lessons that you've learned and what's some of your most exciting work right now? Because I know you've got something big coming up.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Rosario, for those kind words. But ditto back to both of you. And so, yeah, I mean, this year, I think it's an understatement to say it's been quite interesting. You know, I've had the pleasure and I would say the challenge in my work of trying to bridge research, practice, and policy together. And part of why I think that's so necessary, but also why it's challenging at the same time is that for me, in thinking about my messaging and audience in the work, it's, you know, having to speak to and from the perspective of academics, activists, people on the ground doing the work, and then policymakers, right? And how we think about solutions. But why that's important, I think it's really about trying to bring a full picture together to really understand the issue in its entirety. And so I think that speaks to this bigger lesson, right, that I've learned, right? So I wrote a piece a while back called Embracing All That Labor Had to Offer. And the reason why I did that is because I've just found, again, in thinking about the different ways that people think of labor today, we as a collective must get better about how we talk about and who we think about, who we think today's workers are. We still operate from very outdated, stereotypical notions. It carries through in the media narrative, some of them, although I think we're getting a bit better. It carries through even in our messages from political leaders. And we still are caught in what I would say is we're in a 1930s, 40 paradigm, which frankly was rooted in a system of oppression and white supremacy, because workers of color, domestic workers, immigrants, were literally left out, right? Those who worked in agriculture and domestic work. And so there were also assumptions about like who workers were from that time, that they were blue collar, white men, working class, right? And we all know the reality is workers are vastly diverse, and they've become even more diverse as a working, I would say, class population of people, right? Workers are professors, graduate students, they're in low wage work, they are in farm work and fast food, they are essential workers, as we've learned from the pandemic. And here's why this is important, right? Like, if our policies are coming from a lens that workers are only this like one thing or this narrow thing, then we totally miss the ball in terms of being inclusive in the way that we think about what the solutions are, right, to these issues. This is why I work on technology, because I think this is a great example of how we see, right, this narrow, limited view if we think about labor policies. So sure, like improving wages, closing pay gender gaps, right, getting access to healthcare and benefits, these are all really critical things, and I would say what we call bread and butter issues. But we also need to think about technology, data privacy issues as both labor rights and civil rights issues in the way that they're being used today by employers in particular. And so again, until we can really think of the fact that we are all workers, as Rosario has said, we are going to continue to operate from a very myopic, narrow, or limited view of policy, and we're just going to miss the ball. And I think that's really critical for us to be able to move into this, along this path of more systemic change, right? So yeah, I think this idea of being more inclusive is really critical, even in who we involve in the work. I still walk into spaces where I'm the only person or woman of color. And clearly that is not who's representative of workers today. So anyway, Rosario, I mean, I know this in a lot of ways we talk about inclusivity, and this comes through in your work. So what would you say, you know, you've learned most as it relates to either inclusivity or just like lessons that you've learned in the last year?
Sure. Before I answer that question, though, I want you to tell us about your really exciting thing.
Oh, yeah. Forget about it. Yeah, so I'm really excited. Next week, I'm going to be engaging with some amazing women. The panel is called The Color of Labor, and it actually really speaks to what I was just talking about, which is like we have to come to terms with the true color of labor to really figure out how to make systemic change. So it's this September 8th, the day after Labor Day, 4 p.m., I'll be with Tanya Wallace-Goburn from the National Black Workers Center. They've been a great partner organization. I'll be with Aisha Satterwhite from coworker.org. They've been doing amazing work, particularly through the COVID, and Nikki Lee from SEIU, who's doing some awesome work there. So I would love for you to join me for that event. And thank you, Rosario, for reminding me, because I knew I'd forget.
Thanks, Fila. And to your question around inclusivity, around what the last year has been like for me, around what I've learned. You know, when I say I feel included by you, it's because there's some aspects of your work where you talk about independent contractors. And I've had to be an independent contractor, having been formerly undocumented, and seeing how exclusive policy makes things really hard for certain people. And I would say that my work since I came in here has been about that, has been about how do we look to create a better climate for undocumented and mixed status immigrant families, not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level too. And I would say that this year with this pandemic has taught me a lot about flexibility. Because I do think that we're in a moment where we're seeing society almost falling apart at the seams because of really exclusive and horrible policy, because of policy that's saying, because you lack an immigration status, you don't get to have any type of support during this pandemic. Because we are just continuing to have to contend with very divisive politics, and it's harmful. It's also, you know, we're at a point where it's just like, what about like what happens when people can't say, let me just work harder, let me just try more. This is what, for me, policy is about. And I've been pushing, specifically with the pandemic, the need to include undocumented families. And moving forward in these next few months, I'll really be looking specifically to the states through the Mapping Immigrant Access Project, where I'll be looking to see what can states do to create a better climate for their immigrant families, because it shouldn't be dependent on geography, what opportunity you have access to. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Taif, because I know we consistently have conversations about this broken and outdated immigration system.
Yeah.
Yeah, outdated to say the least. So I felt before I move on to talk about what I've been up to, I just wanted to say how grateful I am to work with you two, but also with the whole team at Next100. I think, you know, the level of support that we've received has been absolutely amazing, and it is why we've been able to do so much within just 1 year. So without boring you all with everything and every project I've worked at Next100, I really just wanted to, you know, share with you something. One project I've been most proud of while you know, I spend my time here with the team, and that is a policy that I got to introduce last week. So brief story, last week I celebrated my 12th year anniversary since I arrived to the United States, to New York to be exact. And I came in as an international student. And when it comes to international students, as we saw this year, they've been under crazy attacks. But not only that, international students for a long time have been just completely ignored and left out of the conversation. So just to tie in, you know, the theme of inclusion, this is the area where I've been focusing on for quite some time right now. And that's why I got to introduce the Keeping Talent in America Act. So basically it's a policy to create a federal program that is designed to attract and retain international students and create also a pathway for them so that they can live permanently in the United States and in a way that could help them continue to contribute to our country and for us to benefit from all of their skills and talents. And, you know, again, none of this would have been possible without the support of my amazing colleagues and friends here at Next 100. So again, I'm just so excited to join you all today. And with that, I would love to now pass it on to our education team with Levi and Raquel.
Thank you, Taif. Appreciate the turnover. Like Taif said, my name is Levi Bohannon. My pronouns are he, him. I'm so excited to be here with y'all and talk with Raquel about our work. Speaking of, Rocky, do you want to introduce yourself and share what you do here at Next 100?
Yes, my name is Raquel Crutcher. I go by she, her, and hers. They call me Rocky here. And my job is to bring the snacks and the jokes, but that is not what I was hired for. At Next 100, I focus on educational equity. Specifically, I focus on how stories and people most impacted should be centered in the education space. My work is personal to me. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. Emma's not gonna agree with this, but the city in the country. And Memphis is a predominantly Black city where policy doesn't reflect the economic empowerment of its Black people. So we lean on education and we lean on our babies. So having to bounce from neighborhood to neighborhood personally to receive a good education pushed me to want to do this work forever. But speaking of the South influencing our work, Levi, do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and the second best place to get barbecue?
First of all, Raquel, I think it's funny to me that you would come onto the Zoom and tell all these nice people that you're the funny one in the office. We all know that that is actually my role. So please step off. My name is Levi. I am from Arlington, Texas, which is a great place to get barbecue, although I can't really compare it to Memphis. And prior to coming to Next 100, I worked primarily in K-12 education policy, but here working primarily to expand high quality and affordable childcare and early education for families. So Raquel, in a lot of ways like you, I'm thinking about educational equity as well, just earlier in the spectrum. But before I jump on my soapbox about the role of early education and childcare policy, I want to spend a minute to talk about the full spectrum of education and education equity. So Raquel, you mentioned it in your intro, but want to have you talk a little bit more about your work in educational equity and what you've done here at the Next 100.
Yeah, so over the past year, I've hit a few different areas and I've contributed to my issue area in multiple ways, whether it be panels or contributions to larger pieces or direct advocacy. I've amplified using three main methods, the first being stories, the second being pushes, and the third being centering the people most impacted and finding a way to bring all of those together. So stories. I published The Coincidence That Changed My Life when I first got to Next 100, and I mentioned a little bit about me and my entire life story in terms of education is on our website. And there I explain why it's important to use stories to listen and to create systemic policy change. The second is pushes. So this year, after George Floyd's death, we pretty much couldn't go anywhere without seeing a company, an organization, or a politician give their words and what I think is a performance. And I talked to Levi a lot about this, but like those things don't protect Black people. Those things don't protect Black lives. And in that piece, I push us all to stray away from performative activism and pull more towards proactive anti-racism. And the third is censoring the people most impacted. So the huge project that I am finishing up now is a national survey of charter school alumni, just asking them not only their opinions and their stories, but also what do they recommend we do for their schools and for the country. I think we oftentimes hear from experts and school leaders and people who sort of teach and like lead charter schools, but we don't hear from the actual people who went to charter schools and became adults. So really excited for that piece to come out. And another one that I'm really excited to work on with Levi is our project. We combine both our curiosity for charter schools and pre-K, and we decided to visit charter schools in New York City that serve pre-K. We wanted to see what was working, what wasn't working, and see how students could be served better. Levi, did I sum our project up correctly?
You do everything correctly, Raquel. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate you turning it back. Yeah, so I want to talk briefly about the project that Raquel and I are both working on, and then share a little bit about the stuff that I've been up to. So like Raquel mentioned, we are taking a look at some of the universal preschool sites here in New York. For those who don't know, New York recently made a major investment in expanding high quality preschool for students that live in New York City. We're taking a look at some of the sites that are doing that work, whether they be in charter schools or community-based organizations, trying to get a better idea of how that work is going, and seeing if there's any sort of policy level barriers that exist that are impeding successful implementation. So excited to keep doing that work with Raquel, who is of course an excellent partner in doing this. Teaches me something new every day. So very appreciative for her partnership on that and generally. So some of the stuff that I have been working on has been primarily taking a look at early childhood education and childcare policy, like I mentioned. Most recently, that meant taking a look at the next generation's attitudes toward childcare. So we partnered with Gen Forward, which is a survey shop out of the University of Chicago, to ask a few questions of millennials and Gen Zers about their attitudes toward childcare and childcare policy. There was this perception that I felt like walking into this work that was prevalent, that was saying that younger folks aren't really having kids and don't really care about having kids, and it's not really a priority for them. And wanted to figure out if that was the case, and if it was, how we could try to push up against it. And it turned out that that wasn't the case, right? That millennials and Gen Zers really do care about childcare policy, really are concerned about the affordability of high quality childcare. We've been pushing that survey out recently. We just came out with an op-ed last weekend, pushing it out there as well, trying to elevate it so that folks know that they should be talking about it, and that there's a broad coalition of support amongst younger folks when it comes to reforming childcare and expanding high quality childcare programs. Also done a little bit of work about writing about the role of early educators. That's a workforce, for those of you who don't know, that is made up primarily of women, disproportionately women of color, and they're often left out of policy solutions. And so I wrote a little bit about how policymakers need to be centering those experiences, right? Whenever we're talking about policy solutions, and investing in those workers is a first step to expanding high quality care. And then I also did a little bit of work looking at the rights of homeless students and LGBTQ+ students, looking at what policymakers should be doing to protect the rights of LGBTQ students, how public funds are being used by some private schools for really gross practices. Not entirely aligned with early education, but as a member of the LGBTQ community and as a formerly homeless person, it is important to me to continue and participate in that conversation and contribute to how districts and schools need to be protecting those students. We've done a whole lot here at the Next100, and we're not even halfway done, or I guess we are about halfway done. And so we've learned some lessons. Raquel, do you want to share some of the lessons that you have learned here?
Yeah, I think the first one will probably be, if you can't go to spin class, maybe not just like sit around for 6 months, like do something with yourself. In terms of my work, the first big lesson that I'm learning at Next100 is that perfection is impossible. Trying really hard to come up with the perfect solution and the perfect answer, it won't work, and it'll frustrate you more than help. The second is the work will be difficult, but it stops for no one. No one was expecting to be in the time that we're in now. And I think one really hard lesson that I had to learn was like, nothing stops. Actually, everything got worse for everyone that I am working for. And the last lesson I learned was, in moments of confusion, center people. I think for me, when I quiet noise and I center Black kids, everything becomes crystal clear every single time. And it just makes perfect sense. What about you? What do you think you've learned?
I have also learned about the role of spin class in my life. I miss it terribly every day. But I think that on a more serious note, this is something that probably a lot of folks that are listening already know. But policy is hard. Policy is really hard. It's really difficult to do good policy that's grounded in practice, that's informed by research, that's responsive to stakeholders. But as difficult as it is, it's also equally as important, right? So government can be a force that can and should be fundamentally be used for good and can change lives in a really meaningful and substantive way. And when public policy reflects that, It's an unparalleled mechanism to improve lives and change lives. It's important to do that hard work, and that's why I've really enjoyed being here at the Next 100 for the last year. So thank you, Raquel. I appreciate it. I know that I've already gone over, so I will turn it over quickly to two of my coworkers, Isabelle and Zaki. Do y'all want to take over?
Hey, y'all.
Hey, what's happening? Real quick before we even get started, one of the things I know I did write in my notes that Raquel forgot around the things that she learned was the difference between circle bread and bagels. So I thought I'd put that out there. Hello, Isabelle, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Got you. Oh, yep. Zaki Smith, New York, born and raised. My blood type is Brooklyn, although I am living in Long Island currently, so some people may challenge that. Yes, my issue area that I've been working on since I've been with Next 100 has been around criminal injustice reform and specifically around formerly incarcerated and the impact of the barriers that exist for formerly incarcerated once they're released from prison. So those are the things that I've been working on since I've been with Next 100.
Yeah, Hische Sango. My name is Isabelle Coronado, and I'm at the receiving end of a lot of the jokes that Raquel and Levi tell, but I've grown stronger because of it. So here at Next 100, I work on criminal justice reform as well, centering Indigenous communities, also making sure that children of incarcerated parents are represented in our efforts, just because I have lived experience as a child of incarcerated parent. So I understand the barriers and the consequences, also the successes that come along with this work. So Zaki, with that being said, you launched something really amazing just a few weeks ago. And although I wasn't there, I was able to see it on Facebook Live, and it already radiated the powerfulness from that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you did?
Yeah, so one of the projects that I launched, just in that vein around the impact of what happens to formerly incarcerated individuals after they are returned back to society, which I am directly impacted, formerly incarcerated myself. And so one of the things that I realized that our community and those that have been directly impacted really had not been educated around those barriers and knew absolutely nothing about it, and just pretty much felt the impact of it, but just did not know that there was a terminology, that there was a word, that there's language, and that there's 44,000 barriers that exist as a result of it. And so I definitely didn't want to go the traditional route in how I communicate with the community. So what I did was I put up a mural. As many can see in my background is the mural that I did. Had an artist, Daniel Mitchell, come and do the mural, and this was a way for me to introduce and engage the community around the impact and what exactly that system is. It is just another rendition of Jim Crow and how they're legally ostracizing over 100 million formerly incarcerated individuals in this country. As a result of that, the news was involved, so had some opportunity to be on the news around it, to get some exposure through that. There was quite a few other media platforms, newspaper articles and so forth and so on, that spoke about the actual project. And one of the news papers said, you can't help but cringe when you see this particular piece. And when I saw that, I was like, bingo, that is the intent. The intent is to create uncomfortability and to create for people to actually look and see, and that they cannot turn their eyes away from this particular situation. So, so it's the In Perpetual Punishment Arts Campaign, looking to do several more throughout the city. And so, look out for those. I have another one coming up literally next week, starting to possibly paint on the 8th of September event, September 12th.
Yes, so I know this mural project, like you were just getting at, is a bigger representation of a bigger issue. And we're just both trying to challenge language that I know we both don't like, which is called collateral consequences. Can you explain what you're doing to change that language?
Yeah. So for me, the art is pretty much like the pill in the dog food. I think the bigger issue for me is just what like Next 100 was pretty much created for. Directly impacted individuals do not have an opportunity to really sit at the table to create or to influence the policies that impact them. And so how could I create a situation that would allow me to actually educate, not only educate the community, about the issue that exists, but how could we go about empowering the community to have their voices involved in shaping this situation, especially more so because they are impacted by these particular situations, and also removing this language of like collateral consequences. One, the consequences are not collateral, right? It's what it is. It's a perpetual punishment. It's civil death. It's a silent life sentence. Like, let's call it what it is versus how do we coin it in this language that will further ostracize the individuals that is impacting. And so utilizing that, I've just, went through testimony at the New York State Assembly about an ineffectiveness, about a current policy that exists in regards to sealing, which does nothing for the people. 600,000 individuals eligible since 2017, with only 2,500 to date benefiting from this particular bill. Panel discussions in Albany, team collaborations, and connecting with the coalition called Clean Slate to push a bill around expungement. Yeah, and so those are the things that came up for me. And so one of the things that was also really important to me is that when I was looking at language and just with the whole collateral consequences, there was just a component that I really just did not take in consideration of. And Isabelle, if you can please share, like, what was that thing? And me and you talked, and so like what that thing was that you brought to my attention, just around collateral consequences that I had not even considered. And so if you can please just share that with us.
Yeah, just like you said, we both came into this work automatically did not like this word collateral consequences. And on my end, it was more so because of when I was researching children of incarcerated parents, and I kept coming across this word. I mean, they try to throw us into this category that includes fines and fees, housing, voting, all these other things that are impacted through the system. But when it comes to children of incarcerated parents, I just didn't see it. I don't see how people, humans, young in their lives, are considered along with these other types of system. We need our own resources and our own policies to help uplift our lives. And so I wrote a commentary piece called "We Are Not Collateral Consequences," where I examined all the different areas that children of incarcerated parents are impacted by. The education system, the foster care system, mental and physical health, economic opportunity, and just seeing like, wow, we have so many things that we need to work on just within ourselves, that's why it's so important in the criminal justice world that we are bringing this attention to this issue. Also, along with that work, I was able to I'm coming out soon with my report on the solutions that I see that are needed to address those issues I was just talking about. So please stay tuned for that report coming out soon. So also in that my first commentary, I did an interview where I interviewed children of incarcerated parents to kind of get the different lived experiences from different children and parents. And while I was having that discussion, Zaki disclosed with me that he was a former child of incarcerated parent. And so I really wanted to include his perspective in my interview piece. And we just saw so many similarities. So Zaki, do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, that experience was like extremely dope because like no one had ever really asked me about sort of my status as a child of a formerly incarcerated parent. I never considered that, right? And so it was really dope to just be in that space and to contribute to that piece. And it was just that power of collaboration to contribute to that piece, to add my voice to that piece. Also was very important to me was the fact that just also in that collaborative effort, me having the opportunity to film you, right? Film you, do a short video, capturing your voice, capturing your image on camera, speaking about your experience and your solutions that you thought would be a benefit to the situation. So that whole experience was incredible, and pretty much since then we've just been collaborating like crazy for real, like doing the thing with the young people, right, working with the pops team, right, group of young people. I came into this work really with the idea also, before I got into the policy, was looking at what was working in high schools and looking to dismantle the school to prison pipeline or what have you. So my passion has always been working with young people, but to collaborate with Isabelle, collaborate with you, was an opportunity for me to jump back into that work, with working with young people and bringing their voices to this conversation, based on their experience and the impact as well. And so, just a quick shift or what have you. So, a major shift happened with the world, and that was Rona came through Corona came through and crushed the building pretty much for many individuals and what their work looked like. And so a lot had to shift because of this pandemic. So I just want to know also from you, like explain like what shifts, what happened, what were some of the things that changed for your work, or did not change, or even increased your work as a result of COVID.
Yeah, just like you said, Zaki, like there was a mission. Everybody are feeling the impacts of what's happening, especially for the communities that I indigenous in the U.S. Um, these are sovereign nations, and they're being impacted. They're closing down businesses, their casinos, their businesses, their tribally owned things, and they don't have the financial support to support themselves. So when the COVID funding came through the federal government, and they were underfunded in the first federal aid package. And I just couldn't find that acceptable, because these are our people and we need to be carrying through them, because this isn't our first pandemic that we've had to endure as Native people. And it's probably not going to be the last, but we survived. And through that survival, I, along with some other Native youth, got together to petition the Senate for more COVID relief funding for the tribes here in the U.S. And we're still waiting on those. Those negotiations are still in Congress, even 6 months past now. We're still continually fighting for our communities, and it's been amazing to see the mutual aid responses, but also the federal government does have a responsibility, and we want to keep them true to that responsibility.
Nice. Yep.
What about in your work, Zaki? What do you have going here in the future?
So right now, just currently working on this, the End Perpetual Punishment Arts campaign, and continuing to connect with the community. Currently working on a Feast for Fair Chance booklet, which gives me an opportunity to engage the community around this End Perpetual Punishment, this silent life sentence, to educate folks around what this is, and not only just from the education, like, okay, here's what in perpetual punishment is, no, but here's what perpetual punishment is, an opportunity for individuals to identify how it has impacted them and to empower them to shift it, right? Because that is the big thing around a lot of this, is like we get bombarded sometimes with information, but then the information sometimes does not lead us to the how to be empowered, or the ways of being empowered to get into action around it. And so those are definitely some of the things that I'm looking to do. I think if I want to go into just real quickly around some of the things that I did learn, was more so like the power of our history, understanding how our history and how the collaboration and having a team and the power of the people and how movements has happened not only in this country but just throughout the world. The power of young people, right? As I've often said when we were talking to young people, and even in our settings, that you look at any powerful movement that has happened on this planet, it has been the result of the efforts of young people. And so just really tapping into that history and acknowledging it and making sure that it is in my work, that it's at the forefront in my work. Also acknowledging the power of government, which something that I was totally disconnected from, the power of local government, in particularly being disenfranchised by government and by policy, not understanding not only the power of local government, but what was my power in it, right? And looking at the fact that what my voice meant in that system and what my voice meant without it in that system, right? And now seeing the power of local government from that standpoint, and government in general, but in terms of local government, in terms of making shifts. So those are the things. And again, there's no such thing as a one man band. You know what I mean? Everything requires people and the power of the people. So, yeah. So that's pretty much it, for me, Izzy.
I mean, thank you so much. And it's funny, this one man band, Veggie Back. I mean, we just hear some of your great sayings that we always get to hear during our time. And then just
I'm number one on the quote. I'm number one on the quote wall.
Yeah, we have a great quote wall with and it's mostly Zaki saying. Thank you all for joining us today. And I know we're running short on time here, so I'm going to pass it back to Emma, and she's going to wrap us up for the rest of this event. Mado, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks to all of you for sharing about your work, and to the audience for some of the questions we've gotten in. Just like in real life, Next 100, we had bagel jokes, New York City versus Memphis jokes, and we talked too much. So it feels very similar. I want to take a couple of quick questions that we've gotten in. Next 100 team, feel free to jump in, or I can call on folks. One question we've got, well, and try and keep your answers quick since we're already way behind schedule as usual. One question we got, Isabelle, I think it'd be great for you to take this one. How can young activists get involved in Next 100 and more broadly in policy change making?
Yeah, so recently Next 100 just had an event called Youth Activism in This Moment, where we gathered a whole bunch of youth activists from around the country to talk about the racial inequities and the Black Lives Matters protests, and really tried to center that talk. And if more people want to get involved, please reach out to us. We're going to have a few more sessions on that and how to develop and brainstorm on better ways to serve young people so they feel empowered to do this work.
Thank you. One for Levi. How do we get to universal childcare?
Oh man, and how long do I have? 5 seconds? 10 seconds? I mean, look.
Negative 5 seconds, I think.
Oh, great. I'll talk backwards. Look, I mean, high quality childcare should be accessible to everybody, period, full stop. Right now, the way that it is structured, if we can call it a system, it really only benefits folks that can afford really high costs. It's really leaving out communities of color, low income communities. And there needs to be like a significant federal level of investment, right? So things like the Child Care for Working Families Act, a Child Care is Essential Act. We've got to, number one, put a lot more federal investment into the system. And number two, have a serious conversation about how we can make sure that those systems are delivering high quality care.
Thank you. And I'll do one last one. I'll throw it out to the group, so whoever unmutes videos first gets it. Levi said, in general, policy is hard, but are there any policy solutions that any of you see that are actually really simple, even if they're still hard politically? Jump right in.
Give kids more money. We should be investing way more in kids, in schools, in the period of time between when kids leave schools. So simple.
Anybody else want to hop in? I thought I saw somebody.
Yeah, I'll say stop wasting talent by training a bunch of international students and having them go home right after graduation. So let's introduce them past the Keeping Talent in America Act.
Nicely played. Anybody else? Okay, I'm going to, awkward Zoom mute moment. No, I'm going to wrap us up. Couple of quick housekeeping things before we turn it over to Zaki for some music. A recording of this event will be made available on the TCF website and on the Next 100 YouTube page immediately following the event. It'll also be on our Facebook page where it's streaming live right now. Our next event, as Fila mentioned, will be next week. It's being put on by both Next 100 and the National Black Workers Center, 4 p.m. Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. The Color of Labor, Recognizing the True Face of Labor. We'll have speakers, we'll have Fila, we'll have speakers from the National Black Workers Center, SEIU, and coworker.org discussing how we can build an economy and society that benefits all workers. You can register for the event on our website. With that, Zaki, can you move us from words to music, please? And thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today.
You're on mute, Zaki.
Zaki, you're on mute. The music's not so good on mute.
I don't think he can hear us because he has headphones on.
Should one of us sing a song?
Who's gonna sing a song? Levi?
Only if it's you, Levi.
I don't know any songs.
Okay, well, folks, thanks for joining us. I promise you, at least Zaki is enjoying some good music right now, as the rest of us like to as well. But we appreciate you coming. We appreciate your support. And we hope you'll stay in touch and keep working with us. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.